Those were the days when I had no other desire than to grow up to be a martyr. While good Catholic boys usually fantasize about becoming Major League Baseball players or professional basketball stars, good Catholic girls usually harbor, at least once in their lives, a secret desire to become a martyr. Well, if I couldn't make it to martyrdom, there was always sainthood, which was kind of like being on the second string of an athletic team. You were good enough to make the squad, maybe even play once in a while, but the martyrs were the real heroes. And on that fall day of my 21st year, I, Linda Vandavander, eagerly awaited my work as an army nurse in Vietnam. I saw it as one of the best ways to help those in need. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. An estimated 15,000 women served in the Vietnam War as nurses, staffers, and volunteers. In all of our wars, women have been killed, maimed, disabled, but most of all, psychologically injured. But they are the forgotten veterans. The Women Wounded is a program that includes prose, Home Before Morning by Linda Vandavander, and 2 poems, Vo Ti Trong by Lady Borton, and Letters from Home by Dana Schuster. Here, women's voices are heard as they cry for recognition. For a few years when I was younger, I imagined myself growing up to be an actress and a singer, but not many middle-class suburban kids were encouraged to enter those professions. So instead, I channeled my dreams toward a more accessible career. The inclination started when I was 4 and running around the house tying kitchen towels around everyone's arms. It continued while I was nursing baby birds back to health. I read all the books about nursing that I could find by the time I was 12. But later, when I was 17 and working part-time in a geriatric home, I began to realize why some in my profession called this job a shitty one. I realized they were probably speaking literally. During those days, I spent almost 90% of my working hours either passing bedpans or giving enemas. Before I even had the chance to see the inside of a nursing school, I became an expert at enemas. I gave them in beds, in chairs, over the tops of johns, over shower stalls, and in bathtubs. Some of those old people had to have enemas every day of their lives. Drove me nuts. But for some reason, I continued liking medicine. My day starts when I see Trong. She lives in the hospital's paraplegic ward, where her mother's been a patient for over a year. Trong's mother suffers from the results of a bullet that damaged her spinal cord while she was planting rice. She'll live another month, perhaps. Trong's job is to nurse her mother, and she's 3 years old. Every day, Trong, dangling an intravenous bottle behind her, wanders out to the food stalls near the hospital gate to buy tea for her mother. Later, she dumps a bottle filled with urine onto a grass mat in front of the ward. Emptying her mother's catheter is another of Trong's chores. Trong is supposed to wait for me outside the paraplegic ward for a ride to a nearby daycare center, but she's seldom there. I look around the ward, and almost invariably I find her peeking out from where she sleeps in the spilled urine under her mother's bed. She wriggles out, runs over, and hugs my legs, giggling. That is when my day begins. Once I got to Vietnam, as each day passed, I found myself developing a harder shell to protect my emotions. I drank heavily, used more grass. I was getting tired. This war was beginning to look a lot different than the one I had believed in just a few weeks earlier. Every time another person died on my table, I try to remind myself that we're in Vietnam to save people from the threat of tyranny. But that became more and more difficult to believe as I heard stories of corrupt South Vietnamese officials, US Army atrocities, and a population that wanted nothing more than to be left alone so that they could continue farming their land. One day, I saw some dead American soldiers lying outside the ward. They'd been ambushed by an NVA unit. The butchers had cut off our soldiers' penises and stuffed them into the GI's mouths. I was outraged by the scene, but not as outraged as I later became when I later saw the same scene, only this time with the dead Viet Cong. That was the first time I realized that our wholesome, clean-cut American boys could be so brutal. And I couldn't explain my unpatriotic feelings to anyone.
Hi, Linda. This is your dear old dad speaking. Right now, I'm sitting here by myself with the tape recorder. I feel like an airline pilot when I speak into this thing. Is this thing on? Testing. This is your captain speaking. Oh, this has been a wild week from start to finish, as I'm sure you'll know from the other side of this tape and from our letters. Oh, Mary got bitten by a dog the other night. She's the original hard luck kid. I'm telling you, with all the other injuries she's had from her car accident, Mary needs more problems like Custer needed more Indians. And Jean's all depressed because she's got some problems with her boyfriend. Lately, this place seems to get depressed every hour or two. If it's not one problem, it's another. Well, I'm gonna sign off now, sweetheart. The flag's flying out front every day. Happy New Year, sweetheart.
I got a down-home letter from my mama today. It was chock plumb full of down-home news. Mama's real glad I'm in Vietnam, working in a hospital where I'm safe, where nobody I know gets killed. Guess Cu Chi doesn't make Mama's down-home news. Some people who knew that I'd been to Vietnam weren't satisfied with "it sucked" as an answer to what was it like. They all seemed to want to know, was it anything like MASH? No, it was real. And even once I was home, I could still see them. The double and triple amputees, boys with belly wounds and brain injuries, and missing genitals. I could see the faces of 18-year-old kids racked with pain as they lay dying. There were others who weren't even old enough to shave, who'd had their faces blown away. They were all with me. One young man comes back into my dreams, as he has so many nights before. There's a large hole where his belly and chest used to be. He has no arms, or legs, and his face is blown away. He whispers something that I can't hear. He wants me to come closer. Struggling against my inclination to run, I put my face so near the place that had once been his lips that I get blood on my cheek. And he only whispers one word.